Hi, I'm Leah, and you're listening to Fifth Period.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fifth Period, the podcast where each week two media teachers take a student-selected film and talk through all their favorite moments. And today we have a supercalifragilistic expialidocious choice for you all. My name is Mr. Brown, and with me, as always, is
Mr. Whittle. No, I'm not going to do the Cockney accent the entire time. Just thought I'd put it out there that, just to kind of infer that maybe that was going to happen. Hello, everyone. Yes, I am very, very excited for this podcast because we are talking about a film that is very close to my heart. I just want to, from the outset, thank Leah, the student who recommended this film. As soon as she mentioned it, it just reminded me of how close this film is to me and my childhood. And the experience over the last week of anticipation to watching it has just been an absolute blessing. So thank you, Leah, for your recommendation.
And not just your recommendation, Leah, but also your intro to today's episode. You are a firm Film Club supporter. You have been with us for the last year and made an enthusiastic return this year. You also suggested Who Framed Roger Rabbit on top of Mary Poppins. So you have had some pretty winning selections. Some would say they were practically perfect in every way. But yes, we're very appreciative of those suggestions. We've had a blast with both of them.
Absolutely. I wanted to actually put it out there because on the weekend, just coincidentally, I went and saw my mum to visit the family, and she was heading off that afternoon to see the Mary Poppins stage show.
There you go.
So I don't know whether Leah recommended it based on having recently seen the stage show that's currently playing here in Melbourne, or whether it was just a coincidence, but it was an absolute coincidence for me because I wasn't aware the stage show was playing. Mum was like, yeah, I can't stick around for too much longer. I'm off to the Mary Poppins stage show. I'm like, well, guess what? I'm watching a bit later this weekend. So yeah, that was a cool coincidence.
Yeah, it's good. It's very, very topical at the moment, which is always nice. It means people can kind of connect with it a little bit more.
Yeah. So we are now into episode 7 of our Fifth Period podcast. Very exciting.
Very exciting.
We're closing in on the end of the term. Term 1, and so we'll have probably one more film left for the term. However, we do have a plan of attack. We want to keep going with the podcast over the holidays, and because we, during the term, want to choose a film that is accessible to all year levels, we do have to watch a PG or G-rated film. However, we thought we might lift that restriction for our holiday period, and we might watch a couple of films that go more into the M-rated, MA-rated, the classification. So thought we'll recommend one to each other. And we want to open it up to the students to give us a third recommendation.
Yeah, so because we usually would have Film Club on a Friday and we're going to be missing out on the last Friday of term for Good Friday, it does mean that we will have the opportunity to watch 3 as opposed to 2, which is what we were originally suspecting. So we're very, very excited to... we've had a lot of suggestions in the past for films that haven't fallen into the G and PG rating, so hopefully those suggestions will come flying back at us again, give us a few different options for something that we can watch.
Absolutely. I think we should put the caveat out there right now that commonly me and Mr. Brown get together in an afternoon after school to record this podcast, but due to scheduling constraints, we have chosen... Well, not chosen, but we have been kind of forced into recording before school for the first time ever. So you may notice that the mood and tone of the podcast is quite different. We are both still well caffeinated, but we maybe will just deliver our content in a little bit of a different manner. It's quite exciting to see what comes out of the podcast.
I'm so glad you have put that out there, and you've done so on my behalf, I'm sure. So Mr. Whittle's a bit of a morning person. It's not uncommon for him to be here this early, doing his own thing. So he's very much in his sweet spot now, whereas I'm all over the place. I am certainly not a morning person. I wouldn't wish subjecting this version of me onto anyone else. So you're really copying it this morning, Wits.
Well, it's not just me, it's everyone who's listening to the podcast. So
that's true.
I feel as the coffee kicks in, Mr. Brown will get into his stride for sure.
Today, what we are going to be doing is we're going to be spending quite a bit of time discussing Mary Poppins, but we're also going to have sort of an extended selection where we will discuss the films that we have watched for the week.
In case you're not aware, we have a segment at the end where we catch up on films that we've watched over the last week outside of the recommended student film, giving students an array of suggestions based on what we've recently watched. And we'd love to hear what you've watched as well. So Please keep the conversations flowing when you see us out and about and online as well in the comments section as to what you've been watching. We really love hearing what students are checking out.
Feedback is a super, super important part of this process for us. Obviously, we're producing this content for you guys, for our audience. So the more feedback we can get on segments that you enjoy, different areas that you want to get involved in. Obviously, we've got the introductions at the start of the podcast. Just a quick reminder that we will be continuing these guest intros for future episodes. So if you have any fun ways that you want to kick off an episode or you want to just trial something out, feel free to come and chat to us and we would love to have you on.
And I guess our final reminder before we kick into the main attraction of the conversation is just spoiler warning. I don't know if a spoiler warning is really required on a classic from 1964 Disney film, but we will put it out there anyway. If you are planning to listen to the podcast and it's about a film that you haven't watched before, maybe go watch the film first, because I reckon you're going to enjoy the podcast more so if you have already watched the film.
We're both a little bit distracted currently. The rain has just come pelting down, so that might be affecting the audio quality just a little bit.
Alternatively, it could just be like a mood setting for the film. It's like giving us an inner London 1910s feel where the wind shifted and someone's coming in. Yeah, we maybe it'll kind of match the thematic mood of the film that we're talking about.
When we discuss Mary Poppins, I just have to say right up front, it's a bonkers film. It is crazy.
Yes.
And for a lot of what is revealed in the film, there's no real explanation as to why it's this bizarre.
Yes.
And I really want to know, because I know this is a film that you hold quite dearly.
Very.
Do you know anything about the actual production of the film? Why they injected so much of this bizarre world building?
So it is based on a series of novels from quite a few decades prior to the film coming out. So I believe the author's name is P.L. Travers. She wrote a series of books about Mary Poppins' adventures in the early 1900s. And then Walt Disney wanted the rights to make the film of it, and he took 25 years to get the rights because she was really reluctant to turn over the rights of her novels to make a film. He obviously just made the one film, and he tried to really kind of push a variety of little morsels from the books into the one film. So I love that word you used, bonkers, because it is very bonkers.
It seemed the only appropriate way to describe it.
The only rhyme or reason that comes to the film is the literal rhyming through the songs. Like in terms of metaphorical rhyme and reason, I knew Mr. Brown would have this as a talking point because there's a lack of logic and linear kind of narrative within the stuff that's presented quite often throughout the film, which you could then argue, is it necessary to any kind of plot progress? But it's creating a feel more for me, like a mood of magic. It's very much a kid's film in that sense. Like I loved it so much watching it this time around, but I know as a child I was just intrigued and enthralled by like some of the crazy, the bonkersness of it.
The bonkersness,
yes, yeah.
That's the technical term.
Yes.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned, obviously, we have different perspectives when we watch things as a child versus when we watch them when we're grown up. It's not something I ever questioned before. Like, I mean, I've seen Mary Poppins more times than I can count, and at no point have I ever gone, why is there a ship on top of the house? But when we were watching it on Friday, it was one of the first things I said to you as we were watching it through.
Yeah, and look, I did try and go and find out about that particular character, Admiral Boom, and like, was there a rationale for having built a ship on his roof? And the only rationale that was provided was that he is an old actual ship captain, and then maybe he's kind of gone senile and has built this thing on top of his roof so that he can continue to feel like he's at the helm of a ship.
If nothing else, it provides us with the hourly canon, which is such a fun way to add some physical comedy into the house. Everything's sliding around and they're just going about their day. Like, this is part of their regular routine to stop the piano from rolling into the wall.
The mother, Winifred, yelling, "Posts!"
Yeah.
And then they're all running around. And then that really animated, clearly the shaking of the actual frame so that it looks like the shaking of the room. I love that, absolutely. Going back to your point about the way that the film's structured, what I really find intriguing watching it now is that the opening song, which is Bert, the Dick Van Dyke's character, dancing around, and then he's talking to all the people and giving them a little kind of morsel where they've got a verse in the song. Then he gets distracted by the change in the wind. And he says, it's all happened before. Like, we never really get told too much about that. Bert's character is saying he's experienced that before, or he knows of something like that happening before. That kind of ties in with the story being a series where, you know, Mary Poppins goes from house to house and weaves her magic and improves whatever's happening and then moves on again. We only learn of the Banks and her interaction with that family, and there's never a sequel made. But I don't know whether... I doubt they would have been setting up for a sequel per se, but it's certainly tied in with the story being a series.
Yeah, so on the note of there not being a sequel, there certainly wasn't one with this collection of characters, but they did make Emily Blunt.
Oh, which I love,
Poppins.
by the way. Did you watch it?
I've never seen it, no. I was going to ask you if
it wasn't as applauded as this one, but I thought it was great. I went and saw it at the cinemas. I really enjoyed it. Obviously come from a place of bias because I love the original as well. I think Emily Blunt's a great actor as well, so I think they did a really good job when it's such coveted proprietary of, wanting to make sure they look after the characters and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think they did a good job of that. But it is a sequel, technically, but it wasn't within the time that Walt Disney was alive and loving.
Yeah,
Walt Disney, by the way, has, in many, many interviews since this film came out, said this is the film that he's most proud of making. His entire Disney canon, he's most proud of Mary Poppins.
I mean, it's a solid choice. One thing that I wanted to talk about quite early on, because I didn't really know where was the most appropriate spot throughout the narrative to discuss it, but the artwork and the style of melding hand-drawn animation in with live action. So in the very opening of the film, you've got the credits, and they're drawn credits, but then you've got, like, Mary sitting on the cloud, and she's actually moving, so they're not just still images, despite what it originally looks like. And it made it very clear to me quite early on, and this was something, because I haven't seen the film in a long time, people always associate the chalk drawing scene with, oh, that's the part where they meld animation with live action. But it happens throughout the entire film.
Absolutely, yep. So definitely the opening credits with the Tuppence song as well. And yeah, there's plenty of times where they have used hand-drawn imagery to kind of represent a setting or just to kind of give a more magical feel to the film. And just a bit of backstory on that the lead animator for this film, I forget his name, but he worked with Disney for 30-odd years, and he was like the lead animator on Fantasia in 1940.
Okay,
he did Alice in Wonderland and a few others as well. So, and when I looked at that art, I'm like, there's just a Disney feel to the art of it.
They have almost a texture to them, so that they are quite noticeable early on. I was like, I wonder how often they do actually include that. And it's in almost every sequence they use it, even if it's just like a set extension.
Yeah.
So they might have the set of the street, but then the very back layer of that is, I think it's called the sodium vapor process. It's like a separation. So when you watch it through, it's they shine like bright yellow lights onto the characters. It's almost like an alternate to green screening, where they use a white screen instead, and then they can separate the layers. It's very similar to what they did for Star Wars.
Right, okay. Well, speaking of not the green screening, I guess, if you're aware of it being a different process at the time, but I did notice that layering in scenes where there was a bigger set. So when they do the Step in Time song, or when the children are running away from the bank, there's a lot of that where they're superimposed on some more grand background. I wanted to be critical on it because the podcast where we did the Indiana Jones, I talked about their green screening and how I thought that was lacking. And this kind of proves that point where 25 years on, I think they did a pretty good job in 1964 for putting these layers together, considering what the technology available at the time would have been. And then 25 years later, Spielberg is kind of giving us something that was better, but not greatly better. I wonder whether Mary Poppins was that far advanced, or whether Spielberg just missed the boat on, maybe spending a few extra bucks to make it look a bit better at the time.
Well, it's interesting because as technology changes and improves, it does make certain special effects more accessible. We've discussed this many times over, but it doesn't necessarily make them better. So because things are easier to do these days, people are spending less time doing them, and therefore the end result doesn't necessarily improve all that much. And so I wholeheartedly agree. I think there are definitely times in the film where effects look a little bit janky, but considering the time that it came out, it was very, very impressive. One big distinction for me is anytime there was a special effects shot, there's a drop in quality of the footage, and that is something that still exists today. I mean, if you're doing a Premiere Pro file and you're doing an After Effects file, the amount of times you have to render that After Effects file before you throw it back into Premiere Pro, there is always a drop-off in quality between your effect shots and your real shots. So obviously they're operating on a different system back then, but it's always quite evident, they're going to do some sort of special effects shot in this because it's a little more pixelated or a little grainier.
Yep. So going through the film, I did like from when we have Bert do the song and dance, then he breaks the fourth wall and talks to us, the audience. He's like, oh, hello. And he starts talking to us. And I love that. I love that they chose to make the film where you, the audience, are in the world. It's not something they do often. You do see it in films here and there, but it's not something that happens often. And I think that that's just an added little touch that makes the film more engaging and more loving for me. Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he's the narrator. Obviously, Mary Poppins is the central character, the title character of the film. And Bert only kind of narrates one or two times, but every time he's narrating, it never feels like, this is the main character, because he's always talking about Mary.
Absolutely.
So she's always at the forefront of the film.
Yeah.
Which is part of the reason why we were so excited about the choice. This is the first film we've looked at this year that's had a female central character.
Yes.
And going through it, I was noting that it's quite a progressive film. I mean, they have an entire song about the suffragettes and the right for women to vote. And so it's a lot of strong female characters in the film, and even in particular moments where male characters, Mr. Banks is singing a song, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's like, how hard it is to be a man in 1910. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek.
Yes, yeah. There's also... That's the same time when his wife, Winifred, is passively manipulating him into taking on charge of finding a new nanny. And so he makes it out like it's his own idea, but she has manipulated him into that position. And it happens to him later again with Mary as well. It's quite interesting. There's no central character. Obviously, Mary Poppins is the central character, but Banks himself, from the midpoint, he becomes the character that is most changing. His character development becomes really integral to what the second half of the film's about. Yeah,
which it does mark quite a shift, because so much of the focus is on Mary and the kids earlier on in the film that it almost catches you off guard when you go, that's what this film's about. But just, it's a really, really good introduction to all of the characters. They're all really fun characters.
Yes.
So we were saying Glynis Johns, who plays Mrs. Banks.
Yes.
She's just... As soon as she enters the scene, I'm captivated. Yeah. I think she is awesome. She comes in, she sings the Sister Suffragette song, gets the entire house moving around, and I'm just in awe of how great she is as a performer.
I did read a bit of trivia tidbit that they wrote in the her participation in suffrage activism was in order to kind of justify the neglect that she was showing to the kids. Where it was, they still wanted her character to be likable, so it kind of allowed the audience to go, yes, she is being neglectful to her children, but there's a reason for it. And this speaks to the era that the film's set in as well, which is the 1910s, where women's suffragette movement was really at the fore. And so it really tied into the era as well, spoke to the era.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say, it's almost a justification for why she's not spending time with the children. I made a note right at the end of the film where they all go off and
let's fly a kite
together.
Yep.
It was at that point that Mrs. Banks abandoned her cause for women's votes, and they didn't end up getting them.
Well, we all know that, at the end of the day, the highest priority that we have in the world is to fly a kite.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Let's all go fly.
Yes, that's right.
But yeah, so just before we move on from her character, I love that sequence and how she's able to captivate the people in the house, but also captivate us as an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a note, it's not actually unlike her to play these strong, powerful women in films. Another film that she is one of the main characters in is The Court Jester, which is a favourite film of mine.
Yeah.
And in that film, it's exactly the same scenario where she's operating behind the scenes, but she's clearly the most powerful person in any room that she is in within that film. And so the central character is always being instructed by her, this is what you need to do next. She's always the one that knows the best approach to it.
Yeah.
Which is just, I mean, she's great. I could watch her in anything. She's such a good actress.
Now that you pointed that out, I think that she does just have that innate kind of character trait of being someone who has an endearing dominance, I guess. Where you are captivated by her and you will listen to her. She's certainly a lovable character.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the fact, as you said, that she's just almost sarcastic to Mr. Banks as well. Just like, oh, you know how the cause infuriates him.
So they obviously then go to writing the ad up for a nanny because their nanny leaves because the kids are infuriating her. And then the kids come down and have their own version of the ad. And I love that. That's when I start really loving the film. And they talk about having no warts. And
they would hate Nanny McPhee.
I love that part of the film. Like the kids become really adorable at that point.
But it's interesting too because they don't sing about unrealistic things. Oh, I mean the physical attributes for sure, but they still want her to have a firm hand.
Yeah,
they're like we do need to be kept in line. And I love that early on the kids are depicted as such monsters.
I know.
They're the nicest kids in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same thing.
They don't ever do anything that seems ridiculous. I mean, even when the nanny at the start is complaining, oh, the kids have run away again. I mean, that's the bare minimum of a job of a nanny.
Yeah.
To not let that happen. So now she's blaming the kids that she's lost them.
Yeah. And then obviously the dad rips up the ad and it goes off into the wind and finds itself to Mary. They have the next morning where the nannies are lining up for the ad that got put in the Times. Mm-hmm. I had forgotten about this little part, but when the nannies start flying off,
away,
the wind takes them away because the wind's changed, remember, guys. So it was all set up that the wind needs to change and something is going to change. So
Mary's going to stick around until the wind changes again.
Yes, so we see the wind dial at the top of Admiral Boom's roof change from east to west. And then the nannies that are lining up for the job get blown away. My favourite bit of trivia that I found was that quite a few of those nannies in the line were men.
Is that right?
Yeah, men dressed up as nannies.
There you go.
Yeah, just like extras for Disney in drag. So yeah, I thought that was great.
That is very good. This is the stage where obviously they all disappear. Mary's the only one left, and George tells is their maid?
One of them's a housemaid and one of them's a cook.
The cook, tells the maid to get rid of all the other candidates. And I just love, at this point, he, as you said, he's sort of manipulated into taking charge of the situation. But he also just thinks all of his ideas are great.
Yes.
He has this awesome line where he says, like, I only congratulate myself that I didn't decide to step in any sooner, or something like that. It's so good how he thinks anytime he joins a situation, it's instantly improved.
And I think that's a great point to bring up because obviously this is at the point where Mary comes into the house and into the story of the film at its main point, and her confidence and self-assurance around her abilities is pretty much set up to then challenge Banks at some stage. Obviously, it happens from the outset, but we can just infer that like it's going to come back to that at some stage where Banks being a confident individual and Mary being a confident individual.
They're gonna butt heads.
Yeah, and then I like what you said before. It's quite a progressive film because we see the protagonist as a female kind of win out in terms of putting her points forward and getting her values across.
Well, yeah, even all of those stereotypes of how women have previously been depicted in films like this, they make a joke of it. At one point he says to his wife, like, oh, don't be so emotional. And she's not being emotional
Yes.
in the slightest.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
the
yeah.
one that has the most
Yeah,
control in
yes.
the room. And yeah, so it's really nice to kind of see them poking fun at it. So still making it very clear that, yes, this was a perception of women at the time, but that they were clued into it and they were just like going along with the stereotype as a way to manipulate George into doing what they wanted.
Yeah, and like when I love that when George is trying to work out how the letter came into Mary's hands and he's looking in the fireplace, Mary decides to give him a trial week. Like she's the one going for the job and she's like, I'll give you 1 week. And
So
like I
good.
just like the confidence that comes across that she is so experienced at what she is there to do. But I'm a bit worried about this particular one. We'll see how we go for a week. I really like that.
Yeah, and so pretty quickly she has this magical element about her. As soon as she's introduced to the kids, she starts pulling things out of the bag.
Yes, so anyone who knows me at this school knows that I carry around a big bag that's full of a variety of things.
Coat rack.
Students have been, maybe not the coat rack, but students have commented on, wow, Mr. Whittle, you seem to have everything that could possibly need in that bag. And I think that it's at this point in the podcast that I do want to point out that I believe Mary Poppins is quite an inspiration for me in a variety of ways and how I like to do things and like also values that I have in life. So certainly preparation. I when I watched this film, I reflected back to my childhood and go, maybe that was something that was influential to me because I certainly am a fan of being prepared.
Yeah, well, I mean, just making a comparison between Mary and teaching in general. She tricks the kids into doing the housework.
Yes.
And often I feel like that's kind of what we do as a teacher as well. Sometimes you do stuff in class under the guise of this is something fun, and then you go, also, you learned something today.
Yes.
I couldn't tell you were learning it beforehand because then you wouldn't have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But now that you have had a good time, you've also learned this. So
Yep.
that was an aspect that I really appreciated when she gets them to sing the song to do the cleaning up.
Yeah, and to make it into a game. I actually made the point that I need to do that more often with tasks I find chore-ish, where I can go, okay, well, I need to get this done, but how can I make it into something a bit lively? You know, marking those essays, like how am I going to turn it into a game?
Yeah, and I wonder too, because the whole film is full of these sort of messages about, well, this is what you should be doing. It can be fun, you can have a good time with it. But because she uses magic so often in the film, I wonder, does that undercut the lesson?
I did think that as well. Like, you know, I'd be all about cleaning up as well if I could click my fingers and the bed was made.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with it then. It's because it's more than that people find it a bit tedious.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm all about her teaching them to sing and have fun with cleaning up, because then when she leaves, they can continue to do that without her. But once she leaves, they can't click their fingers and use magic to make the bed.
Correct.
So I thought that was an interesting point.
I do like the idea, though, just going back to the point you made, where there are quite a few life lessons that come from this film. Certainly for me, the idea of being prepared is one of them. Also having a happy mood by default, a cheery disposition is what I believe Mary calls it, and how that can motivate others. Again, another trick that we use in the classroom where we, no matter what kind of day we're having, we want to go in and try and have a smile on our face so that we kind of reset for that period. It's something I do quite often where I know that if I try and put forward a positive demeanor, it can be influential around the people around me.
I find it really, really interesting how anywhere she goes, people adore her.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of positive energy really does, in the real world, rub off on people. And it's interesting how if you're in an environment where people are having a bad day, you're more inclined to have a bad day as well.
Yeah.
And so I like that the film quite accurately portrays that. I mean, it's exaggerated, it's over the top, but they're all still rooted in real ideas that
Absolutely.
exist in the world.
Yeah.
It's a pretty basic story,
Yes.
but the way that it's told so creatively and it's fun and there's musical numbers, quite nice moral lessons within the world, but told in a fantastical way that it doesn't teach the lessons just to adults watching the film, but it teaches it to the kids as well.
Sure. I think the simplicity of the actual narrative is really evident, but what we get throughout the film is reinforcement of those ideas and those lessons and message and the morals. It's at this point in the film that we get to that first one, which we're going back to the bonkersness of the film. we're about to jump into a picture. So the kids leave the house after cleaning it up and seem all very excited. They go off and meet Bert, who has changed to his second job at this stage.
Originally he was busking. Now he's doing the chalk drawings.
Yeah, what does he call it? Skeeving, I think. He had a weird Cockney name for it, but he's drawing doing the chalk drawings on the pavement. Quite a few of these kind of episodic portions of the film where it doesn't really progress the narrative, it just more reinforces the ideas that the film's trying to put across. Like them jumping into the world of the picture, it's about having a great day.
Yeah, well, it's interesting too because before they jump in, Bert tries to do it.
Yes.
And then is unsuccessful, and Mary has to use her magic to get them to go into the picture. Yet again, reinforcing.
I love how
much better.
I love how matter of fact she is. Just like, oh, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
it's like so procedural the way she goes about it. Whereas Bert's like being such a larrikin about it. What did you think of Dick Van Dyke's Bert? Like,
I adore him.
Good, because I do as well. I could see that maybe some people who watch the film could find him annoying after a while, but I think he's great.
Like, even when he's first introduced, you see his teeth, and they've kind of like drawn on the scratches to make him look a little more rough around the edges.
Yeah.
But there must be so many times where he's doing a scene, and they kind of just say, just go.
Yeah.
Like, Dick Van Dyke is such a performer that he elevates every moment in the sequence that he's in, as do so many of the cast of this film. But because he's so big with his physical comedy, you can always see him trying to get just that little bit more out of every sequence.
Yeah.
And what a perfect time to bring that up, because when they jump into the chalk drawing, the penguin dance sequence.
Oh, so this is my favourite part of the film.
Mine too.
The Jolly Holiday with Mary, where the kids run off down the road and it's just those two singing.
Not a great nanny, by the way.
Not a great
off on
nanny.
your own.
Yeah, into this weird picture that we've just jumped into. I'm sure you'll be fine. Just go hallucinate somewhere else.
Yeah.
Mary and Bert then trot along down the pathway, and it's a Jolly Holiday with Mary. My favourite song, my favourite sequence, just the way the music shifts and kind of moves, and the song lyrics as well are so much fun. And then there's a penguin sequence and dance in it as well. This is my favourite part of the film.
He interacts with the penguins.
Yes.
Like, it would have been so difficult to do. I mean, now you see they've got a tennis ball on a stick that they can talk to, but I'm pretty sure the animators in this case, like looking at behind the scenes footage of it, the animators were just animating around where he was looking.
Yeah.
So his control in his performance to be talking to these penguins that clearly aren't there, and the fact that he can physically engage with them. He does the stopping of penguins, but then jumping over the last one. There's so many interactive moments that are amazing, like, to see. When he pulls his pants down so that he's got the same kind of leg span as the penguins.
Like, when this came up in the film, I was like, I wonder if Mr. Brown's going to be annoyed by this, because he pulls his pants down and then suddenly the crutch area of his pants is
significantly longer.
Triple the length of like what the crutch would be otherwise.
I mean, they're inside a chalk drawing, so I wasn't getting too hung up on the details.
I was hoping you went down that path, but I thought maybe you're going to go that. Yeah.
To be honest, when it happens, I didn't notice it too much. I was like, oh, was his costume designed always like folded over so he had larger pants? And then quite clearly when he pulls his pants back up again, I go, no, it wasn't.
That's right.
These are different pairs of pants.
Now, speaking of the penguins in this part of the film, do you recognise them from anywhere?
Do I recognise the penguins? Not from my day-to-day life.
Not from like a previous film that we've talked about on the podcast?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Yeah, so these penguins make an appearance as the waiters in Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
They bring in the Scotch on the rocks that's actually a rock.
Yeah, so like just a little callback to a previous podcast and a film that we've watched. The waiter penguins from Mary Poppins are also in Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, that's fun.
Talking about the interaction that Bert has with the penguins, I did actually notice as I was watching last night, that one of the penguins, there's where they reassemble into the chorus line for the final part of the song. There's one penguin that was off doing something else, and if you watch that penguin's expressions closely, they've made it that penguin is learning how to get in step with the other penguins and with Bert. So it's not just Bert interacting with the penguins, but the animators have also been really thoughtful as to how the penguins interact as well, which I'm not going to say it adds realism to the sequence because it's animated penguins.
Well, but I mean, often in musicals, when people start dancing, everyone knows the dance immediately.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that there's a penguin character that's actually having to learn the dance along with it.
That's right, yeah.
I like in the sequence too, he's rattling off all the names of other girls.
Yes.
Bertie. I mean, Bert really gets around. But he mentions them all, and then you can see Mary's getting a little bit peeved by it. And then he's like, oh, but you're much better than them, obviously.
Yeah.
I really like how much fun they have in terms of their facial expressions.
Yes.
Every sequence they're in, it's very animated facial expressions, which obviously is synonymous with the musical genre. But because they're in this magical world, this fantasy world, you really need to be that elevated in your performance in order to just fit.
And I think that's where casting is really important and where they really hit the nail on the head with getting Dick Van Dyke and Julie Andrews in for the film. And this becomes very apparent at this point in the film as well. I think Julie Andrews has already proven her value prior to this, but for Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious and her dancing in that showed just how wonderful and all-rounded she is as an actor. I think just what she delivers in that dance is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's not often these days that you see someone acting, singing, dancing in a film and you go, you genuinely are a triple threat. Ordinarily, we have films now where you have one of those talents as your strong suit, and they will absolutely spend quite a bit of time and money and resources to teaching you the other ones.
Yeah.
But when she comes in, when Dick Van Dyke comes in, you just go, no, you're just a natural.
Yeah.
You just got this.
Yes, for sure. Like we see that in his first sequence where he's the one-man band. That he looks like a cartoon character when he's delivering that. Julie Andrews' Mary Poppins is quite stiff up until the point where she jumps into the picture, and then she really comes through in terms of her animated kind of delivery as well. So it's at this point where we're absolutely in love with both of those characters, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly am.
No, I'm right there with you. And after this sequence, we go back to the house, and they take their medicine.
Yes.
Now, this is when I noted she's drinking on the job.
She is drinking on the job. I wanted to make a note that just a youthful ignorance and oversight, I never, at any point in my childhood, noticed that as she poured, each pour was a different colour.
Different colour, yeah.
I did not notice it until I watched the film the other day. I would have watched this film, no word of a lie, at least 50 times as I was a kid. More, closer to 100. I would have seen this film so many times, never noticed that. And then there's even, the reaction from the kids. But I never clicked that that's what they're reacting to. They even say, right, mine tastes like lime cordial, mine tastes like strawberries or whatever. And I never notice the colour. It may have been because I was watching it on a crappy TV in the early 90s and the colour didn't come across. I'll justify it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a fun moment. I also noticed they ask, or they're talking about the day, and she's like, what are you talking about? That didn't happen.
Yeah.
She's full of gaslighting him.
She's very much gaslighting him. I love it. And then
but I never understood the purpose of it. I don't know why she doesn't just say, yeah, we did go into a chalk painting today.
And then followed by manipulation through song of don't fall asleep, guys. It's okay, don't fall asleep. But I will sing a lullaby to you. Now, that lullaby was actually Walt Disney's favourite song from the film.
Yeah,
and he, for years and years afterwards, would call one of the writers of the music, Sherman, up to his office and just say, play it.
And he would instantly fall asleep.
Yeah. So I found, that's not my favourite song from the film personally, but I love every song in this film. And there's so many songs in this film.
There are, yeah. They like what you were talking about with the episodic nature of the film. It's like they just go on little adventures per day. And so their next adventure is to visit Uncle Albert, who talks like this the entire time.
Called upon by the dog Andrew.
Yes, of course.
Which reminded me of me having a conversation with my dog Dawn, and maybe
I did the exact same with Millie. Yeah.
So I love that Mary kind of said, "Slow down, I can't understand a word you're saying," and bless you and all this stuff.
So it's like, what trouble at the old mill?
Yeah, but it was like beyond the Lassie-esque.
Yeah,
it was like a full conversation, but yes, then they go and meet Uncle Albert, which I had forgotten about this scene. As soon as they arrived at the door, I'm like, Oh, that's right. And I love this scene
So much fun.
So
Yeah.
Uncle Albert is actually the voice of the Mad Hatter from the Alice in Wonderland cartoon.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's almost the identical voice.
Yeah, I when I listened, I'm like, I know that from something else, and then I had to do the Googling, and yeah, sure enough, he's the Mad Hatter.
Yeah, I mean, you're quite a fan of puns yourself. So the jokes that he tells in this scene,
I literally laughed out loud at a bunch of them. Like, they were so funny to me. I'd forgotten how funny they were. And I reckon I laughed more, maybe because now I'm at that, old man level of liking those cheesy puns. But I was in tears with laughter at some of them.
you're going to be going into your classes today and telling all of those jokes.
Yes.
About the man with one leg.
My favourite was the one where he tried to, get them to hear the sad story.
Oh, yeah.
And then he delivers a line at the end. I was like, yeah, that was great.
I always find it super infectious when people are exaggerated laughing. In this sequence, in particular, how big their laughter is.
Yep.
You can't help but laugh along with it.
So much joy is emanating from the screen with this scene. I just think you'd be challenged to not at least smile when you're watching this scene. The Tuppence song for me is a very noted shift in tone for the movie. We have had this joy and adventure and excitement, a real kind of, and it kind of speaks to the way, the perspective of the film. It's like this childish kind of wonder that's going on. And then we're sitting with Mary after visiting Uncle Albert, and they've got the snow dome, and it's just got this melancholy to it. It's really, it's not sad per se, but it's definitely a shift in mood for the film. And I noted it more watching it as an adult, but I was always aware of it in as a child as well, that, yeah, it's like, oh, this is really kind of, yeah, a melancholy is the word for me.
Yeah, and I think you've kind of hit the nail right on the head in terms of the shift in mood, because it's at this point that she suggests that George takes the kids to work with her.
Yes.
And, yeah, they end up going in and meeting the bank manager, also played by Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, so I'd never noticed that before as well.
Oh, really?
So this was new for me. As an adult, I was like, oh, wait, Mr. Dawes Sr. is Dick Van Dyke. Yeah. So I really liked learning that this
And he's
time around.
having an absolute ball with that role. When he's first introduced, and he just can't step down that one step, I was losing it. It is so funny.
He's so good. I also like that they make the concept of capitalism in general really scary in this sequence.
They're terrifying.
Yeah. The whole idea of finance and banking, that's a really dark, sinister scene with all the bankers and then the kids running away through the back streets of London. It's a scary scene.
Wait a minute. The family surname is Banks. Just because we've been talking about the symbolism of character names in all the other films, I think this one might be the most blatantly obvious.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you call it symbolism if it's just literally?
I don't think it quite qualifies.
Yeah. Bert runs into the kids as they're running away from the bank, and he has a little conversation with them about, because they're talking about their dad wanting them to do something that they didn't want to do, and he has he makes a point to them about how their dad is probably lonely and having to, and I was just I was tugging at heartstrings on that one as an adult. I think realizing the lesson that they're trying to convey through that, where adults and parents can have a lonely life trying to get through and support the kids and stuff like that. So a tear came to eye for that one.
Yeah, it's interesting because often in films they would kind of portray the father that's at work as so neglectful of the kids, and it's like, well, they should get rid of their job. They should just quit. And it's the Santa Claus.
Yeah.
He's not spending enough time with his kids, so he's an evil man.
Yeah.
And it's like, I like that this film has elements of that in terms of him not spending as much time with his kids, but also making it a realistic depiction that, well, no, he has to do this to support you.
And also what the mother's intents are with her activism. She's trying to make the world better. She's not just out there sipping wine all day. She is trying to do something good, but it still is resulting in some neglect of the kids. So it's really, it's a much more complex representation of family than you can kind of perceive it at surface level if you really dig into it.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I like that Bert's there for them in their time of need, and they go back to the house and end up getting sucked up the chimney.
So, all right, so this is where, like, I did say that Jolly Holiday with Mary is probably my favourite song, but this part of the film in terms of what is happening, this is my favourite part.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
yeah. So, like,
I can understand
sucked up the chimney.
A little dummy pops out the other side of the chimney. So funny.
All four of them.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the two kids, and then when Mary and Bert go up there as well, and the dummy pop out of the chimney, you see that it's the actual person once they're coming down. It's
so funny.
Clearly just a nobody.
I love that she takes out her makeup case and powders her nose with ash.
Yes.
Instead.
Yeah.
That's just so funny.
Yeah, but like this sequence in terms of its look, the aesthetic of this sequence is just enthralling. Like the use of color and lighting, costume, and the using the soot to kind of add this like wild element to it. The lighting and color really stood out for me because they are. Is it dusk or dawn? That I think it's like
it's dusk.
Dusk.
It's the end of the day,
at the end of the day. And they're really utilizing that in terms of like showing the rooftops of London,
pinks and the oranges and the blues,
and going back to what you were saying, where they're adding texture to with the color as well. But then also using the setting as something really magical and captivating, where they're kind of going along the rooftops as well. And then it goes to Step in Time. Oh.
Now, Step in Time was one that I have a very, very special place for in my heart. My dad used to crack out brooms and mops and hand them around to all my cousins. There's photos of him like galloping around as Bert while everyone else is going with him.
I love that because, it's so much fun. The whole dance sequence, the way that you sit with Mary and the kids as they watch them as well, kind of the way the camera's set up and the way they move around. It's the call and response of the lyrics as well. And then the way they use that where Bert's saying... over the rooftop, and then over the rooftop, Step in Time, like, and he's just like, we're going to do this now, and then when Mary then participates, she steals the show. Like,
oh, for sure.
She captivates the dancers around her and captivates the audience because her movement, and then the spinning as well. The spinning head's so iconic. Yeah.
While we're discussing Mary, her outfits in this film are awesome.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, the outfits in general are awesome, but in this scene, she's wearing like a red... suit with the skirt and then like hot pink shoes.
Yep, and her hat has added flowers to it, and so that adds that magical element to it. But absolutely, the costume as well stands out then at this point. Yeah,
so they end up back down in the house, and the call and response doesn't end.
No.
Anytime someone says anything for the rest of the scene, they do the call and response to whatever they've said.
And I'm like, when that started, I'm like, we need to do that more at work. I think when we want to just like aggravate someone, we need
it's going to piss a lot of people off. Yeah.
So it's at this point when they went back down and they're dancing around the Banks' house that I decided that this film needs to go on to my favorite films of all time list.
Wow, okay.
So I have a very coveted list of films on my Letterboxd account. And I added it regardless of the fact that at that point, prior to adding it, it was at a neat 25 films of my favorite films of all time. So it's now at 26 because Mary Poppins, I was reminded, and again, thank you, Leah, that this is one of my favorite films of all time.
Look, it's a very deserving choice.
Yeah.
I'm just glad too that we've now done a film that's in your top films because I'd ticked off 3 or 4 of mine in the selection that we've done. So I'm welcome aboard.
Prior to this, Truman Show in our first 6 episodes was certainly up there, but it wasn't in my favorite films of all time. But I really enjoy that film thoroughly. But yeah, this one, it's on the list for sure.
It's at this point that I guess the resolution of the film starts. Bert has the conversation with George about what Mary's been doing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, funny that it has to be Bert to be the one that makes George see reason.
Yeah. And then Bert gets the call that he's going to be fired in the morning as well. Or fired that night.
George gets the call.
Sorry, George.
Yep.
George gets the call. And then he heads to the bank. The shots of him walking to the bank, they're beautiful shots.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many beautiful shots in this entire film. But the way those particular shots are framed, I was just captivated by those shots.
And then when he arrives at the bank, all the old men are having just a whale of a time firing him.
Oh,
and
but like
the punching of the hat and like the destroying of the umbrella, and the guy's like, oh, "Not that."
Yeah, the like what I loved about that one that stood out for me was the best that they could do to really humiliate him is to make him feel and look disheveled. And that says something about losing your job is not the worst thing in the world. I mean, obviously, financial impact is an issue. But it's about them going, okay, if this is the best that they can do and Banks is still going to go home to his loving family, has he really lost everything? No, he hasn't. Yeah. So I really love the point that came across with that.
Mind you, he doesn't go straight home. He realised he loved his children and then stayed out all night.
Well, he's dancing around London singing about it.
That's true. He had to go find a kite fixer.
I wonder how many times between that scene when he tells him about how good a word supercalifragilistic is, and then he goes around London saying it before he gets home, like how many people he annoyed in between then and then.
Oh, no doubt the whole town.
I did note that when he gets to the bank and there's that scene as he enters the room with the board table and the bankers sitting around it, the lighting and the colour, it's very proto-David Lynch-esque, but like obviously this was prior to Lynch making films, so I would imagine Lynch was heavily influenced by things like this. I know he loves Wizard of Oz, he loves Sunset Boulevard, so films from that era are really important to David Lynch, who is one of my favourite directors. And yeah, the red curtain aside, just that alone in Twin Peaks, the lighting and the kind of hauntingness and the framing of it, yeah, very, very Lynch.
The symbol in the film is very, very rich. Like it looks so ominous in that moment.
Yeah.
It's amazing how a shift in his character's perspective makes you as an audience just relax.
Yes.
You're like, oh, he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's fine with it. Obviously, we have the closing of the film where they all go out to fly a kite together.
Let's all fly a kite.
And I love the guy talking on the phone, and he tells his boss to go fly a kite. It's like he's telling him to F off. I'll go fly a kite.
Go fly a kite. Yes. The film wraps up quite rapidly.
It's very quick, considering how long it takes for some of the narrative to develop. Yeah. At the end, it's just like, and resolve.
Yeah. Which I didn't mind. But when I realised there's only 10 minutes of the film left, and I'm like, we haven't even said goodbye to Mary yet.
Yeah, that's because they don't.
Yeah. I really did like the ending of the film, and I like that Mary refuses to tell the kids that she loves them, but then she talks to her umbrella head.
Creepy umbrella head. Which, by the way, is the code word for today, or code words for today. Creepy umbrella.
Creepy umbrella is our code word in this podcast today. Fantastic. Let's just leave it there, see where people are picking it up. But yeah, the umbrella head does say to her, you do kind of love them, don't you? And she's like, shush, don't say it. All right. And I love that because Mary's got a duty to society where she wants to go and help others, and she needs to have some mental fortitude to move on no matter how much she loves where she's at. And that really speaks to me as well. Like, I like the idea of, as a teacher, maybe not being in the same place for the rest of my life and, like, moving and helping others around. So, whether it be changing different things that I teach or whatever. And it's something we do as teachers as well, where each year we have new classes. We can't stick with the same class forever. So that really speaks to me as well. Yeah.
The only other thing I had to say about the film was right at the end, they catch up with all the people working at the bank, including the bank manager's son. And they just announce that he's died from laughter, and they're all like, oh, well, who cares?
And he was really kind of happy that he died from laughter. Like, what a way to go out. And, like, agreed. Like, he obviously seemed quite decrepit. So maybe he was relieved that his dad has finally moved on, and that his dad did so in a way where he's floating about laughing.
Joyous, yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you. So, we've spoken about this many times before. You're a fan of a neat 90-minute film. Now, this one clocks in at 2 hours and 19 minutes. How do you feel about that?
I had a feeling you were going to bring up this question, and I was keeping a somewhat critical eye throughout the film as to what could be cut. And I did feel like there were a few moments that, for instance, the birds' conversation with George about the lessons that Mary had taught.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that needed to happen. Like, just from his interaction with the bankers at the end, that could have been revealed there. But there was probably only like 5 or 10 minutes that a really kind of keen eye for me would have cut. It still would have been a 2-hour film for me, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like we've pointed out, it's quite episodic with some of the adventures that they go on, but I feel like every adventure is important to reinforce the ideas of the film.
Yeah, well, the reason I wanted to ask you about it is because I have very mixed feelings on the length of a film. I mean, if I'm really enjoying a film, it can be as long as it wants to be. It's when it feels like it's dragging on that I don't like it. And we'll probably get to that a little bit when we're talking about some of the films I've watched this week. But yeah, I really wanted to ask you about it because obviously now that you've announced that this is in your list of top films of all time, what kind of an impact that has on the runtime and your feelings on that?
I'm a fan of a film being efficient with its storytelling, but again, like you, if a film is 3 hours long, but it's every minute mattered, I'm okay with those minutes. It's a matter of how are those minutes used. All right. And so editing counts, and being ruthless with your piece of art really is important. Just because you filmed it doesn't mean it needs to be in there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we should probably move on. We did mention up top that we've both been watching a lot of films this week. So if we're going to do our segment on what we've been watching for the week, we probably better get stuck into it.
This segment that has been suggested by another student, is that right?
Javier, our French exchange student.
This segment has motivated me, and I believe you as well, to actually watch more films throughout the week because we want to have an opportunity to talk about an array of films.
Yeah, I don't know if this was the case for you this week, but I was feeling very competitive and clocked in an additional 12 films on top of Mary Poppins.
So, I think it was on Friday you said you were at a good portion of 6 or 8 films, and I said, all right, well, I need to pick up my act. So over the weekend, I watched 6 films and thought, I maybe have caught up to Mr. Brown, and then on Sunday night you reported that you were at 10, and now at the time of recording the podcast, you got through 12 within the last week.
Yeah, you know what it is? I usually have a TV show that's on the go, and now since this segment has been introduced, I've just swapped out for films.
But I think it's an important point to make that how you made this point to me earlier in the week when we were discussing this, where a TV show you will happily have running in the background while you're doing things, whereas a film, you will make the point of paying attention.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That is true.
So I think if you went around to Mr. Brown's house at the moment, it's probably not as neat and tidy as it normally would be because he has prioritized paying attention to 12 films over the last week.
That's true.
Yeah.
The only TV show I watched was Succession. I started Succession, which I also couldn't do any folding of laundry while I was watching because it was my first time watching it. So yeah, but that was an interesting watch. But let's get stuck into films for today. So I'm actually going to start off talking about 3 films simultaneously. Jumanji: The Next Level, Shrek the Third, and Shrek Forever After. And the reason I want to talk about them simultaneously is I feel that they all have quite a lot in common in terms of my viewing experience of them. So I enjoyed them. But the thing was that I was surprised that I enjoyed all 3 of them as much as I did. So I'd never seen Shrek 3 or Shrek 4 because the first 2 sort of came out when I was in my peak Shrek watching age, and I really enjoyed them. I think I was a bit over Shrek by the time the other sequels came out, and so it was the first time watching them. They're going to be removed from, I think, I don't know if it's Disney or Netflix or wherever they are at the moment, and so a notification for that came up yesterday, and I thought, yeah, I might give them a watch. I've never seen them before, and they hold up. I think they're not quite as good as the first 2, but as sequels, I think they're pretty solid. And I felt the same way about Jumanji: The Next Level. I was never super excited by the idea of Jumanji being rebooted. Obviously, I love the original Robin Williams one, if anyone wants to put that forward.
Please.
But the reboot with The Rock and Kevin Hart in it and Jack Black, I still think is a bit of fun. I thought The Next Level was actually more enjoyable than the first film. They've got some new fun twists. I feel like they continue the story in a good way. yeah, like no one's going into it going, I'm about to see an amazing film. But for what it is, I think it ticks all the boxes. So yeah, those were kind of my fun watches. Hadn't seen any of them. I don't think I'm the intended audience for any of those films, but still really, really enjoyed them as a bit of levity in comparison to some of the more intense films that I'd watched for the week.
Well, speaking of fun watches for me, I did start my weekend with one that I don't even know why I was so appealed. I think it's just the marketing that came across. But on Friday night, I put on Cocaine Bear. Which I know you also got through over the weekend.
I have to tell you guys, Mr. Whittle messages me on Friday night, and he's like, I haven't quite finished it yet, but oh god, it's tough. It's a tough watch.
I think the word I used was torturous.
Torturous.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I didn't really know what to say. I mean, it's a film called Cocaine Bear. What were you expecting from it?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's exactly what it advertised.
I think, I would agree with that. I think it gave me exactly what I expected it would, and therefore I'm like, if I knew that this was going to be the film, why am I pressing play on it in the first place?
It's a great question.
And I'm not regretful. Like I've said it multiple times in the podcast now, I'll watch any film at least once.
Mm-hmm. Hope you're listening, Riley.
Outside of Top Gun Maverick, because I tried to sit down and watch that twice and I still couldn't finish it.
Yeah, well, you said you'd watch it once. You've already done that twice over.
But yeah, Cocaine Bear was a miss for me.
I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to be ridiculous and over the top. A lot of SNL types getting together and just being silly. One thing that I was shocked by, though, the effects were pretty good.
They were okay.
Considering how ridiculous the film is, you wouldn't expect a big budget for something like that. But I mean, the bear attacks.
They were okay. Yes,
they were okay.
Yeah,
they were okay, I guess.
Now, just to take the spot of one more, I did also to see that this segment within the podcast is an opportunity to go and watch films that I absolutely adore, so I can talk about them within the podcast.
I got a few of those too.
So one film that I visited on Saturday was the 1999 Superstar, which is a SNL offshoot. So Molly Shannon plays a weirdo school student who has aspirations of becoming a big superstar. It's an early film for Will Ferrell. Tom Green's in there.
It's got sort of Night at the Roxbury vibes.
Absolutely. It's all that Romeo and Michelle era, Night at the Roxbury, that late 90s SNL feel to it. This was a character that was from SNL that then got put into a feature film. Glynis Johns from Mary Poppins plays the titular character's mother. So that was a kind of cool coincidence.
It's funny you say this. I was having trouble getting to sleep last night, just dreading my early morning. And 6 degrees of separation, the 12 films that I had watched this week.
Wow.
They all had a character that linked between them. And Glynis Johns is one of the ones that I used. Yeah.
Highly recommend this film. A lot of laughs. It maybe has aged, so I'd be interested to know what a younger viewer thinks of a film like this. But for me, I think it's a lot of fun. A very silly comedy, but the characters make it kind of endearing. Mary Catherine Gallagher is Molly Shannon's character. Will Ferrell in it as well. I just love the characters in this film. So it's a good fun comedy.
Yeah. I also had a couple of rewatches of films. I rewatched Scream 5 and Batman Forever on Friday night with a friend of mine. So I was trying to introduce him to the Scream franchise and have periodically been showing him film by film. It was really good to rewatch that one because obviously you and I recently spoke about the fact that I'd seen the new one, Scream 6, and that it had shifted my my ranking of the films. And having gone back to Scream 5 last week, I now have a new ranking yet again.
Oh,
so that has now trumped Scream 4.
Which I think, did I try
it's
and
what
call?
you called, yeah. So
because I loved Scream 5 as well. Like I would certainly have 1 and 5 at the top of the list of the first 5. I haven't seen 6 yet. But yeah, Scream 5 for me is a win as well.
Yeah, and I'm doing a rewatch of Scream 6 this weekend with my sister. Her and I watched all of the Scream films together. So, yeah, I'm very, very keen to show her the new one. And then Batman Forever, which I think gets a bad rap, but I think it's exactly what it needs to be.
Which one is Batman Forever?
So it's one of the Joel Schumacher ones.
I know
the one
it's one
with
of those.
Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones.
Right.
Which, if you know the bad blood between them while they were filming, it makes the watch of this film so much more enjoyable.
I have seen an interview with Jim Carrey talking about the bad blood. Is this the one with Uma Thurman as well? Is that
No. This one has
Nicole Kidman.
It does have Nicole Kidman.
Yeah. No, I can't recall any of that era of the Batmans. They just did not appeal to me then nor now in the way, because I love the Tim Burton Batman and I love the Christopher Nolan Batman because it's dark and edgy and there's a grittiness to it. Even Tim Burton less so, but it's still kind of dark, whereas these got more cartoonish and
See, that's why I think I enjoy them more now.
Yeah.
Like, I almost as if it's a parody. This is the one that has the iconic scene where Chris O'Dowd, as a Robin that is far too old to be Robin, hangs his washing on the clothesline using karate. And it splices in these shots of Alfred looking impressed by what he's doing.
Right.
Like he's captivated by this new style of hanging the washing. I got to imagine that from that point onwards, Alfred also hung the washing in that same way.
If you want to see Robin hanging washing with karate, go check out Batman Forever.
There's no if about it. You want to see washing with karate.
Did you want to knock out another one? Because you got
Sure,
a few.
I do have a few. I'll go Emily the Criminal next, actually. So this was an Aubrey Plaza film. It was really good in terms of building tension. I wouldn't say that I connected with the story all that much, but it definitely had some great sequences where I was on the edge of my seat, nervous for this character. I mean, if you watch the trailer, you'll get a pretty good understanding of how it plays out. I don't really want to go into too much detail, but it's a character study. It's about a character whose back is against the wall and the choices they make in that situation. I think it's a good watch.
I've been meaning to watch this one. I have heard some good things about it, and I am a fan, generally speaking, of Aubrey Plaza. But maybe we'll segue into one more of yours. I'm not a fan of a particular film that I know you also watched on the weekend that stars Aubrey Plaza.
Operation Fortune.
I watched this film a few weeks ago. Mr. Brown watched it the other day. There's a few parts of this film that I like, namely Hugh Grant's character.
And I made a note. You were saying you weren't sure if it was his same character from The Gentleman.
Yeah, can't remember.
I can clarify for you. It's not. So he's not well-to-do in The Gentleman. He's quite scummy and lower grade, whereas he's like an arms dealer in this. So he's super rich and he has a mansion. But he has just such great lines. I noted this one down where he's like, they're talking about him. Josh Hartnett's character says to him, like, oh, what was it like, the step up from being a millionaire to being a billionaire? And he says, oh, that's probably my cue to say, money don't make you happy, but it effing does, Danny. It does. I'm so happy now. I'm so happy.
He does redeem any kind of, like, the plot in this film with the peaks and troughs of just, like, the atypical kind of action storytelling is just so boring for me in this one.
Yeah. Look, I certainly didn't find it boring, but I wasn't as captivated in this film as I have been by previous Guy Ritchie films.
Agreed. Yeah.
So The Gentleman's really high on my list. I love Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, and I love Snatch, whereas the other ones just feel like... And then he's got some other films as well.
Yes, exactly.
So those
three would be up there for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely fun moments, but... overall, it doesn't hold up against some of these better ones.
Now, another film that I checked out over the weekend, one that I've been quite excited for because Brandon Cronenberg is the son of the horror guru
Davey Boy.
Davey Cronenberg to his mates.
And to us.
Yeah, Brandon Cronenberg released his first film 2 or 3 years ago called Possessor. And I saw that at the cinemas and was just taken aback by it. I just thought he had a really strong, unique vision for what a horror film could be. Obviously, there's nothing new under the sun, so he has his influences, but his aesthetic and like his approach to making a film was really strong. So I was quite looking forward to Infinity Pool. And so I finally checked that out over the weekend. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as Possessor, but I did enjoy this film quite a lot. I think it had a cool kind of idea about how apathetic people with such wealth can become. The film was not perfect. It was far from perfect, but I did enjoy it. And I know you checked it out as well.
I did. I don't know how controversial this is. I haven't really seen how popular the film is, but for me, it was a big swing and a miss. Like I'm a huge horror fan. I love David Cronenberg. I hadn't seen any Brandon Cronenberg films before, and this certainly wouldn't entice me to go check out his catalog. For me, I find that perhaps it's just this style of horror that doesn't really resonate with me. Choosing to go for weird over substance.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that there is quite a clear message behind the film, and I appreciated you explaining that. Even just then, I was like, yeah, that's true. It is a really interesting idea of depicting a certain class in society. For me, I just didn't enjoy the watch.
Okay.
I respect the message and the themes behind it, but the characters are just so insufferable. If I don't care about the characters in a film, I don't really care about the film. And so there's a lot of really trippy sequences in the film, some of which is visually distracting, I think.
Yeah, I didn't. Some of the way that they kind of represent the hallucinations and stuff, I didn't really enjoy. I did want to ask you, and maybe this will get too techie, and maybe this will be cut from the podcast, but the framing of the shots. He chooses, and I know we talk as media teachers about the rule of thirds and where you position people within the camera.
Mm-hmm.
He and his cinematographer very deliberately frame shots in an off-putting way, and
Yep.
I like that. I found that really captivating, and it added to the story. Did you notice it, and what were your thoughts on it?
I absolutely noticed it, and I got the intent behind it.
Yeah.
It's obviously trying to make us as an audience feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned camera shots, though. When the film starts, it starts with these sort of 360 rotations.
Yeah.
And when that was happening, I audibly sighed a little. I think those shots can look spectacular and they can look beautiful, but they've also become
Cliched?
very much so.
Yeah.
And if you're not using them for a specific purpose, then why are they there at all? It's almost just like, look how good at filmmaking I am. Like I'm doing the 360 shot.
Oh, see, like I know, I get the point you're trying to make, but for me, they were used with purpose. They were saying you're in an other world because the film is set on an island.
Mm-hmm.
So it is trying to set a premise of being outside of a comfort zone. You are in a world that is other. Because like what I really loved about the setting was that it's at a place that seems foreign, but it's not an actual place. It's a fictional place that they've made up. I generally appreciate the point you're making, though, where when we see these stylistically cool use of camera as filmmakers, and we need to encourage our students for this as well, you need to be cautious to use them with intent.
And as I said, because I obviously didn't have the same appreciation for the film, you'll be finding things in it that I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I get to a certain point in the film where I resign a little bit. Because I'm a fan of David Cronenberg's work.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was really good at almost like that gore or physically feeling uncomfortable by situations that the characters are put in. Used a lot of prosthetics and things like that. And we see quite a bit of that in this film as well. But I just don't think it has the same impact for me personally because it's used on a symbolic level that I think it missed the mark.
Sure.
I have a great appreciation for horror that it works as a metaphor. I think that you'd refer to it as elevated horror.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly not dismissing that as a genre wholeheartedly. Some of my favorites fall into that category. But this one, for me, I watch certain sequences in it and go, well, this is just weird for the sake of being weird. It's not actually achieving anything for me personally.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. For me, another film that I watched just quickly was a nice, lighthearted comedy called Together, starring Ed Helms and up-and-coming act. Well, she's well established now, Patty Harrison. Not too much to say about this film. It was a nice, sweet 90-minute film. I did enjoy it. It was just a light watch about friendship. So if you're looking for something light and kind of nice, that was a good film.
Together.
Yes.
I've got 3 to go. How many have you got left?
2 more.
Next one, Fall, because I really want to just get it out of the way. It was not an enjoyable watch for me at all. It's centered on 2 characters who climb the aerial tower, and then the ladder falls out from underneath them. Now, this is a style of film that I really appreciate. I know it's quite cheesy more often than not. It's usually filled with bad dialogue, especially because a lot of times it's just focused on one character. So the dialogue is them talking with themselves. If you look at a film like The Shallows with Blake Lively, she's stuck on a rock by herself talking to seagulls. And the dialogue is never strong in these kind of films.
Just to clarify, this movie Fall, it's set in the one setting where
it starts with them getting to that location, but once they're there, it's pretty much all centered around the tower. So they climb and then they're stranded.
Yeah, so therefore the dependency on dialogue is because there's nowhere else that the film actively moves.
Exactly right. And where these films fall down is that they needlessly put in dialogue. These characters are in this location, so we have to give them more stories about their personal lives, and we have to give you more explanation of their relationship together. So we're just going to have them talk about things that they probably wouldn't naturally talk about if they were in this situation. Yeah. And it was just not an enjoyable watch. I like the idea of survival films and trying to get out of a situation like that, but it felt like there was a lot of plot points that were needlessly shoved in. There was like scandals between the characters that were revealed while they were up on the TV tower. Some weird plot twists along the way that I thought didn't quite fit into the style of the film that they were doing. I'm specifically being vague in case anyone still does want to watch it after my glowing recommendation.
So I just want to point out that this, the caveat that this will be a film that I never watch, because when I got told that the film was about someone stranded at a height, I had my palms started sweating. I am immensely scared of heights, and so when my friend told me that this is a film that you shouldn't watch because it's this, I'm like, yes, that's correct. I will never watch this film. Because it's something where I will just feel that fear too much.
Fair. And the effects for it are great. I know they did a lot of real stunts and things with it. And that was what kind of drew me in when I was watching advertising for it. I saw some behind the scenes of the stunts and I was like, oh, I'd be interested to watch that. But yeah, the dialogue is awful. At one point, she's trying to climb the aerial to get even higher. And her friend, as a reassuring thing, says to her, "It's okay, it's just like pole dancing," and then starts singing, "She's my cherry pie." It's like, you're in this dire situation. Is that really what you would be saying to your friend at the moment when she may potentially fall to her death at any point?
The next film for me was another revisit, so I really wanted an opportunity to talk about this film because it is also in one of my top films of all time. It's Lady Bird. So it's Greta Gerwig's technically her directorial debut as a standalone director, and it features Saoirse Ronan. The main star in this film for me is Laurie Metcalf as the mother. Every time Laurie Metcalf is on the screen, she steals the show and she makes me bawl my eyes out because her depiction of a mother who is trying to do the best that she can is just, it really hits home for me. So this is a coming of age film. Really fun, funny film. Very well written. The dialogue's great. The characters are great. Timothée Chalamet, an early film in his canon as well. So I really, really recommend people check out Lady Bird. It's one of my faves.
Speeding ahead now, because I realise we have been talking for quite some time. The Cube is my second last film, which is a horror thriller film. I had already seen this before. I really wanted to revisit it to see if it held up as much as I had enjoyed it the first time. And I think one of the things I have so much respect for is that the creativity behind the production design of this film. You could have such a low budget with this film because the entire setting takes place in these cubes, and it's suggested that there's quite a lot of them. And what they do is they have this one set of a cube and they just change the lighting in it. So it becomes a red cube, a blue cube, a green cube, but it's just this one set. And so a really, really creative way to do like a low budget horror film. Again, it's very character driven. I felt like one of the things that didn't hold up as much was how quickly there are shifts in how the characters act. But I can sort of suspend my disbelief a little bit in that because obviously they're in this dire situation where their lives are at stake and they're trying to escape. And so, I mean, I've obviously never been put into a situation like that. Perhaps I would act as erratically as those characters are. Hopefully not some of those characters. But I thought it was a good one to revisit because it's a good lesson in You don't need a big budget to make an engaging film.
Yeah, so that's the point. Like, I remember this film. I saw it years and years ago. And yeah, for me, it's a great example of how a limited budget isn't a limitation in storytelling. This film was really creative and unique for its time. So yeah, check out Cube for sure. Last one for me was semi to prove a point to Mr. Brown and others that just because I don't like Indiana Jones doesn't mean I don't like action films in general. So I went back to my catalogue of films that I love and reminded myself that I absolutely adored the first John Wick film. So I rewatched the original John Wick. I do have the intention of seeing the new one as well.
I've heard great things.
I've heard great things as well. Rewatch of the first John Wick reminded me of how great a film this is. What I love is how quickly the first act is done. Like, this is an example of you can just get the story premise set within 10 minutes or less. Just make it about the action. There's a lot of reliance on Keanu Reeves as an actor in this one because he's a big draw card for audiences.
I mean, I'd trust Keanu with my life.
Exactly, so. Right? Like, the fact that he is an actor who is well known for doing his own stunts allows the filmmaker to not have to cut so much in the action sequences and make it so that it looks realistic and therefore makes it a better experience for the audience. But also, as soon as you decide that you're going to have a fight scene happen in a disco, you just get to play with lighting as a filmmaker, and they don't hold back in this film with the use of lighting as well. But so much fun, great action. Keanu Reeves is Keanu Reeves all the way in this. Like, so good.
Stony baloney.
So first John Wick was the last one I watched for the weekend.
I'm with you on that one, mate. That is a great film.
Yeah.
My final film, and this contrasts quite nicely with you saying storytelling in a very reduced period of time. I watched Babylon, aka Babylon, which stretches probably an hour longer than it needs to.
Yes.
It comes in at over 3 hours for its runtime. I know you've seen it. I do want to be very clear. Despite the fact that it's a long film, I think it's a good film, but I could easily cut an hour out of it.
I think by cutting an hour out of it, it would have made it a good film. I didn't hate the film, and I loved the idea that was finally presented at the end as to what the film was, an ode to the beauty of film. Yeah, an hour too long, absolutely.
Yeah, but it has some great sequences. So the film takes place in the era where sound is introduced into film, and the very first scene we see them trying to employ sound into the creation of a sequence is an amazing scene.
Yeah.
And they have to keep kind of cutting because there's disturbances in the background, something we're no stranger to at the moment with the rain pouring down on us outside.
Yes, we persevere.
Yes, so hopefully it's not too distracting for you guys, but they have to keep redoing the scene over and over again because of all these interferences. And that was something that I really connected with.
Yeah.
I know that frustration of having to redo things until you get them right.
Yeah.
So I really like that sequence. Finally, at the end of the film, he goes and he sees Singing in the Rain, which again is a depiction of the introduction of sound into film. One thing that did for me, though, was made me go, I think I would have rather just watched Singing in the Rain. So that's the problem with including a better film in your film.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
But that's pretty much where I wrap it up. I know we ran a little long in terms of our own watches this week, guys. I assure you I will not be going out and watching 13 films a week. So this will not be a regular occurrence, but there was just a lot that had been sitting in my back catalogue for a while that I had to tick off. A bit of a hit and miss week, but there were definitely some really great things that I discovered.
Hopefully people have listened along and get a few recommendations out of it or a few ideas on what they watch for sure.
We probably should leave it there, guys. I'm afraid the wind has just changed here, so we have to be on our way.
Yes.
I do want to put forward all of the obligatory likes, subscribes, share it around. For people who want to do new intros, come and chat to us about that. And please just, check out the other content that's on the channel as well.
Yes, and leaving it there, me and Mr. Brown are off to fly a kite.
Yeah, we are. Have a good one, guys.
See you, everyone.